Hey, this is Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author. If you're listening to this and it's still October of 2023, go check out my Kickstarter for special editions of the Cursebreaker series. That is running until October 14th at 10:56 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is fully funded, so there's no risk. Any pledges now, you will definitely get your books. And if you're listening to this after that time, you can still buy them. We're funded, so those omnibuses will be available afterwards. I thought it would be fun if I read you a bit about the books that are in the Kickstarter. So my Kickstarter is for 3 special edition hardcover omnibuses. Those 3 omnibuses collect 9 action-packed fantasy adventures full of found family and reluctant heroes. So really, really grateful to everyone who's pledged and gotten us over the goal and funded the project. So I've gotten off topic. I wanted to read to you the first chapters of some of the books that are in the omnibuses. So I will read you the first chapter of Cursebreaker Faceted, which is book 3 in the Cursebreaker series, which you can also get if you get the first omnibus, which is Cursebreaker books 1 to 3. That's part of my Kickstarter, and you can get it in ebook or hardcover. So let's go. So here's chapter 1 of Cursebreaker Faceted, and that chapter is titled Magical Spies. Witches and woe, the spy knows, life's shadows, mirrors, and lost troves, an old Sharon proverb. This is not a fun adventure. Rand poked Sarn in the ribs. I know, and I'm sorry. Sarn peered around the stack of crates, screening them from view, and fought the urge to punch something. Dirk and his 4 cronies rounded a bend and vanished from sight. How could they still be at liberty? He'd reported them to Jurlo and Nolo 4 weeks ago. Why hadn't they informed the guards? What did he have to do, catch these fools red-handed? He had back in May, but no arrest had been made. Granted, policing fell outside the purview of the Rangers, but Jurlo should have reported my findings to the guard captain. Sarn gnashed his teeth in frustration. Crouching low, he checked out their situation on his head map. Rand poked him again, interrupting his speculation. You promised a nice adventure. Shh, we don't want them to hear us. They're bad people, remember? They are? Rand clamped one hand on Sarn's shoulder and stood on tiptoe to peer over the crates. I don't see anyone. They entered a storeroom. Well, their icons had. What were they doing in there? Something illegal? Sarn's hopes rose. Maybe he could summon the guards and let them tidy up the last piece of the nightmare marring his best friend's death. Can we go? You can't see them. Rand tugged Sarn's arm, intent on towing him if necessary. The sight of his 4-year-old son trying to budge him startled Sarn out of a laugh. This was so unexpected. He met his son's determined green eyes, and reality smothered his mirth. If he summoned a guard, what would happen to Rand? Few knew the boy existed. Sarn chewed the inside of his cheek as he checked his head map again. But other than show the positions of all 5 men, it gave him no further insight. And why should it? Since when was his magic ever helpful? An image overtook his sight. In it, a terrified Rand plummeted toward an endless spiral of stairs. Sarn closed his eyes, unable to forget the magic tearing out of him to catch his son. Point taken. You are helpful sometimes. The memory crumpled into a ball, then a tongue of emerald flame consumed it as his magic resumed its sulk. It wasn't a fan of the whole surveillance thing either. I want to go now. This is boring. Rand kicked a crate. Yeah, it is, but I have to do this. Sarn sighed and ran a hand through his hair, dislodging his hood. Maybe his son was right. The longer they stayed here, the more likely they would be discovered. Besides, 4 weeks of on and off surveillance had turned up nothing. Not a single box of angel's dust beyond the one he'd reported a month ago. But those creeps had to be involved in the murderous mess back in May, and they'd pay for their part. If he could just convince someone in a position of authority of their wrongdoing, Dirk and his friends would be arrested before his secret could come out, and his son would be safe. Why do you have to do this? How to explain to a 4-year-old about drugs, murder, and demons? You remember Shade, right? At his son's nod, Sarn continued. Well, it's partly their fault he's dead, and partly Shade's fault too. Sarn glanced over the waist-high stack of crates. He should entertain his son instead of endangering the boy. What the hell was he doing here? Rand's unblinking gaze asked the same question. Jurlo's words repeated like heartburn, and Sarn cringed. Who died and made you lead investigator? Maybe I should move along and find something more constructive to do. But Dirk and company had to be part of the illegal allele trade. Grief tightened Sarn's chest and closed his throat. The drug had addled his demon-riddled friend and contributed to Shade's death and 13 others. More innocent lives would become entangled in that same hallucinogenic web if someone didn't stop this. Papa? Rand poked him. Sarn put an arm around his son. At 4 years old, Ren was a real pip and precocious too. Judging by his furrowed brow, Rand was thinking hard about something. Never a good sign. Why are we here? Because I know they're up to something bad, and their victims deserve justice. Arn rubbed his chest, but the pain remained. He would speak for them, the drugged out, their shattered families, and the dead, because no one else would. His fist tightened, securing that promise. As if cued, Sarn's sixth sense fired off a warning. He skulked behind a full pallet, his mystified son at his side. Rand needed the sack shielding them from view. How do you know that? Know what? For seconds, Sarn had no idea what his son was talking about. His mind had drifted back to the dead and their loved ones. Rand shot him an annoyed look, which he deserved. That they're up to something bad. Trust his son to ask the hard questions. I don't know. Now hush, something's happening. Before Rand could ask what, Sarn covered his son's mouth. 5 icons on his head map headed in this direction, Dirk and his compatriots. Panic rose, but Sarn fought it with cold logic. They were hidden in the middle of a recent shipment of goods. No one saw us arrive. No one knows we're here, Sarn told himself, but he didn't believe it. Dirk was a canny bastard, and the shipment itself raised questions. Where did the shippers find so much ensorcelled wood? Not in Sheari. Her forests were 90% enchanted and intelligent enough to kill axe-wielding men. Yet he was surrounded by wood of the non-enchanted variety despite the impossibility of it. Where did it come from? Could it be illegal? The bells of Mount Eredrin rang 13 times. Rand's fingers twitched as he counted the bells. Standing on tiptoe again, Rand whispered, 13, in Sarn's good ear, followed by, I'm hungry. Of course he was. Rand was always hungry. Sarn nodded, and his stomach gurgled a request for lunch. Maybe he should stop now and come back later. Sarn consulted his map again. Where were these jokers going? Not towards him and his son. I should follow and find out. I'm hungry. Rand poked Sarn again. And maybe I should fetch my son some lunch. Sarn sighed. Why was nothing ever easy? Because he was a 20-year-old single parent and his orphaned upbringing did him no favors. We'll go in a few minutes. I just want to see what they're up to. Rand scowled. You promise? Thanks to the magic in his blood, promises were binding. So instead of answering, Sarn crept down the cluttered tunnel, sliding between stacks of numbered crates. He paused at each one long enough to commit its numerical sequence to the 100 already in his memory. They might be important. As the additions settled into their slots, Sarn froze. A pattern had been building since his first visit back in May, and it was now ironclad. He glanced at the new containers and identified each one's contents, except one. Sarn approached the box whose number diverged from the pattern. He had to open it, but he had nothing to open it with except magic, and that could get complicated. Voices stopped Sarn. He dropped into a crouch and pulled his son close to his body, quieting the unhappy boy. Miles of naked stone bounced every word Dirk and his cronies uttered, turning their conversation into a jumble of meaningless sounds. Sarn cursed his ill luck. Partial deafness in one ear did him no favors. There was one other way to glean information, but should he risk it? Sarn mulled the idea over while his son fidgeted. Not seeing any other choice, he gritted his teeth and touched the stone floor. Magic surged out of his hand, and green fire raced down the tunnel. Information threatened to wash his consciousness away in its sparkling cascade. The glow of his green eyes increased, giving away his position until he squeezed his eyes closed. Let go, Papa. I want to play with the magic. Rand squirmed, but to no avail. Controlling the magic took all his concentration, so Sarn shook his head. He fought to keep the magic from crawling over the crates and up the walls. The damn thing wanted to investigate every crack and crevice, but he kept steering it towards the 6 man shapes lighting up his map. His magic had already identified 5 of the men present. Dirk, Ragnes, Chryso, Gorfen, and Villar. Who was the 6th? His magic walked up the newcomer's leg, investigating his, no her, body for clues, but it sent none back. Something about her made his magic recoil. Other than her gender and presence, Sarn received nothing more about her. So he pulled on the magic, forcing it to return. But it fought him and strained to delve deeper on its own mission. The Litharians, his magic whispered, in an eerie repeat of last month's mental tussle. They're dead and dusted. But Sarn's magic refused to listen to him. And why should it? What was he but its untrained bearer? After he dealt with Dirk and company, he had to make time to fix that. You need to play with the magic, Rand had said last month, and his son was right. The idea chilled Sarn. So for now, he imagined the magic as a radiant green cloth furled inside him. And shock of shocks, after one more assay, his magic receded. Sarn exhaled the breath he'd been holding. How long before his magic won the contest of wills? He rubbed his aching forehead. Not long, judging by the pain pounding in his skull. Maybe if I slept more, I'd have less difficulty. Aralar resisted the urge to draw on the 5 men. Live steel might improve the discourse, or at least hurry it along. Her 40th interlocutor, Dirk was it, looked like he'd lost a battle with a statue. Plaster coated his clothes, and sweat had smeared the dust into a sticky paste. Every time the gray-streaked leader opened his mouth, excuses fell out. Aralor squeezed the hilt of her sword, but none of the sheep ogling her noticed thanks to her too long sleeves. A garden had thrown up on the dress she wore, creating a hideous floral pattern. But while wearing the garish thing, no one gave her a second glance, not even these fools. Its ugliness fit in with the decor of the mountain stronghold. Why did people live in this crazy place? Its ancient builders had been insane. They'd carve an entire city inside a mountain instead of on top of it, which would have been the smart thing to do. And she needed these idiots to hurry the hell up. She had deadlines to meet, a prelate to greet, and an important test to conduct. Time was wasting, but she fought the urge to tap her foot. Giving away her impatience would only slow things down. She fixed her gaze on the leader of this rabble. Where is it? Either you can deliver what you promised or you can't. Make up your damn mind already, so she could slay them all and be done with this ridiculous errand. Aralor eyed the other 4 men and sized them up. Please give me an excuse to exercise my blade. It's thirsty. In her pocket, she had a sample of the cure for all that was wrong with Sheari. But did she have a sanction to use it? No. Nor did she have a pure enough sample to make a dent in the magic saturating her homeland. But her initial tests were intriguing enough to warrant acquiring more, a lot more. That's why she was here in this disturbing place talking to a bunch of fools unworthy of her exalted presence. Patience wins all duels. Aralor tightened her grip on the leather-wrapped hilt until her knuckles complained. Short-sighted fools ran her order. Let them. She knew what needed to be done, and she would do it as soon as these louts handed over more of the cure from Sheari's magical ills. Then Sheari would burn. Her hand relaxed, and a smile quirked her lips until she caught the tail end of Grey Dirk's speech. Her sword left its scabbard so fast it blurred. She tapped Dirk's throat right below his Adam's apple. One flick of her wrist, and his thick neck would be missing a head. So tempting. I'm not some doe-eyed chit swayed by posturing or pretty words. Produce or die. You can't take on all of us, said a rotund fellow cleaning his nails with a knife to Dirk's right. He leaned against a pallet. His dark eyes dismissed her as nothing more than a slender girl in a frilly skirt. Aralor rolled her eyes at his machismo. If you want to bet your life on my skill, so be it. With her offhand, she threw the dagger hidden up her sleeve. It slammed point first into the pallet, pinning his arm. Shall I toss again? Or have I made my point? This she directed at Dirk, whose face colored under the plaster. Or was it flour dusting his person? You've made your point. His glare appended a silent psycho bitch to the end of that statement. A seeker on her own is never alone, as long as she's doing God's work. You'd better remember that. With a flourish, Aralor sheathed her sword and hid a smile at the hostile glares Dirk's friends shot her. At least they now understood their position. Yes, she represented a religious order, one with militant roots and aspirations of civil strife. In times of crisis, people found faith. Since God did not always provide said strife, his faithful had to light the pyre and burn down the establishment for him. All Aralor required now was that brand. You have 2 hours to get me more of this. Aralor withdrew a black stone from her pocket and cradled it in the palm of her hand. Its matte facets drank in the light, dimming the ever-present Lumiere crystals studding the ceiling. They were another anomaly, another symptom of the magic plaguing Sheari's green miles, but they would soon be gone. Swear you will get more. Swear you will get what I want. Swear it on this stone. Shadows swelled in the corners of the room, discomfiting the 4 men and their spokesman. Aralor held herself rigid by an exercise of will. Any good Shearin knew darkness was not just the enemy of light, but the call sign of the adversary. Invoking it came with risks, but Sheari teetered. With one good shove, it would fall, ushering in a rebirth free of magic, so technology could take its rightful place as the prime mover of the future. Holding to her belief, she steeled herself to play with the devil's rocks. And that is the end of the first chapter for Cursebreaker Faceted. So I thought that would be a fun thing to read you the first chapters of each of the 3 books that are in the first omnibus that is part of my Kickstarter. And, again, you've got until 10:56 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on October 14th to head over and back the campaign. If you get all 3 of the omnibuses, you'll get 9 books. And that's 2,527 pages of epic fantasy adventures, starring a reluctant mage, which we met, which is Sarn, his precocious son / wannabe sidekick, which is Ran, which we also met, plus also a host of other characters like the Queen of All Trees and Shurlo and Nolo, and they do play a large role in this, and a lot of other people. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll come check out my campaign. I'll have the link in the description of the show notes. So that will do it for this episode. If you're listening to this and it's still October of 2023, go check out my Kickstarter for special editions of the Cursebreaker series. That is running until October 14th at 10:56 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is fully funded, so there's no risk. Any pledges now, you will definitely get your books. And if you're listening to this after that time, you can still buy them. We're funded, so those omnibuses will be available afterwards. So thank you so much.